Good evening, everybody. That's working? Yep, perfect. It is now 7 o'clock. My name is Nathan Shanks. I'm the current Mayor of the town of Gawler. I welcome elected members, staff and the members of the gallery. I'd like to start with the statement of acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Just run through the agenda. We'll go through roll call. I have an apology from Councillor Lorna. Unfortunately, he is very sick. That is the only one. There's an apology. Fantastic. Do I have any motions to grant leave of absence, members? There be none. Put that down as nil, and leave of absence nil. Non-attendance nil. Deputations, I believe, is nil. Okay, we're now on our decision reports on this special council meeting. Item 4.1. Mr. CEO, did you and staff want to make a presentation?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Don't have a presentation right at this point in time. Councillors will note. Councillors will note. Can you hear that? Yep. Can you hear Ozzy? Okay, I'll keep going. I think it's going okay. Councillors will note we've got a information session following this meeting where we'll go through in quite some detail of the budgetary impacts since the draft budget went out, and we'll also talk through some of the specific dollar impacts of things that have come up during the community consultation process. As far as a high-level summary is concerned, we've had 21 people have made submissions to the budget in various formats. What was heartening is through that there was some positive acknowledgement of projects that were already contained within the draft budget, and we also had some projects come up that people would like us to consider including in the draft budget. But also we had some commentary for people asking for things which, if you read through the commentary in the report, we feel we can accommodate with existing budgets without asking any more funds as part of the budget process. There were 4 items that I would class as requests that would require council consideration to add further funding into the budget. There was the DADS group asking for $8,000. There was a submission around community grants suggesting that the participatory budget funding get rolled into the community grants funds. The softball club out at Carbeathan put in a request for some shade structures. Sorry, I'll go back to the dollars. For the community grants, that's essentially $40,000 there. Softball shade sales would be a borrowings item. That's about $110,000. And there was also a request to renew the Hemmerford Grove irrigation. And from memory, that's a similar figure. Is that correct, Sharon? 150. So there's actually only 4 items which I think, if council would remind or want to consider them, would have a material impact on the budget. Now, when we put together the draft budget, we're sitting with an underlying surplus of $180,000, which is a good place to start, considering all the things that we were managing. Now, Sharon will go into this in much more detail as part of our briefing session. But during the exhibition period, we had lots of changes to our income side. We also had some pressures come through on the expenditure side. Many of those attributable to the global unrest we have at the minute and the impact on fuel prices, but also You'll note that we've had a 25 basis point increase in interest rates during this period and a prediction of further interest rate rises. Now, when Sharon and the team put together that analysis, it actually turned out that we're slightly ahead of our underlying surplus. And I want to say slightly, it is slightly. It's 186,000. Now, so in terms of the 4 items that I've suggested if Council wanted to consider in terms of the dollar impacts on the budget, I'll comment on why I've not made any recommendations around that, and that's out of respect for this chamber. The chamber hasn't had an opportunity to unpack the community consultation until this very point in time. It's up to the council now to particularly to consider the feedback that's within the report there, and also to consider perhaps the 4 items that I pulled out, which if council was of a mind to look at, they would have some impact. I think it's important to componentise the 4 items. 2 of them are operational, the 8,000 and the 40,000. Now you'll note in the report there, I did put together an option for council's consideration down the end of the report, where I suggested it may be an option to increase the community grants to a figure of 40,000, making 2 rounds of 20 each. That would make a $25,000 impact on the budget because you already have $15,000 sitting in community grants. And I also had the option there of including the DADS group figure with a suggestion that it would be reasonable for that to be funded out of the surplus, and we could still come in with 180 is still a reasonably thin surplus, but that would bring us to 156-ish in our current numbers. So I'm having a strong regard for whether I was going to recommend to council about moving the proposed rate rise, and my advice at the minute would be to not increase the proposed rate rise. CPI for April is currently, was at 4.2%. So our 4.3 is thereabouts, sitting at CPI at the moment. Obviously, you may have seen the advertiser did a bit of a league table with 86 councils and showing where our fellow councils sit. So we're sitting right on CPI essentially at the moment. But I think that's my commentary in a nutshell, Mr. Mayor. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Before I do, I did notice that I've got Sharon Perkins there as a presentation. No, you didn't want anything to add to that? No? Okay. No worries at all. Sorry for... I saw it sitting there. I went, hang on a minute. Sorry about that. No, all good. Any questions? We've got plenty of time. You...
Through the chair, I just probably just want to reiterate or support to sit there and say that if council do actually want to incorporate some changes to the budget as a result of the submissions, it would be best that those motions are actually put forward at this meeting, so then we can actually have the full impact when and the annual plan pretty much complete when it actually comes back to you for adoption in a couple of weeks' time. So that means we're not necessarily doing calculations on the fly at that meeting, and essentially you will understand what the actual budget and the operating surplus is that we're actually adopting on the night as well.
Questions? Deputy Mayor, I saw your hand first.
Mine is on a bit of a random item in here. It was not random, but it's in relation to our our animal management plan, we've got to investigate in September of this year, August of this year, the possibility of having a second dog park in the town, particularly in the southern areas. Now, I understand over time that's changed to be in the southern urban areas, which will probably be when the Cuddler development happens. I'm just wondering if if as part of that investigation, we're going to look at whether a dog park is needed in the existing area that we currently have, or whether that's just for that future area. And if it does include the existing area, and there is seen to be a need for a second dog park before the development of Cuddler, is that something we have factored into the budget and have factored in with the aim of getting state or federal money, which might help us to deliver on that? So long question there. Yes, yeah.
And what we could be proactive about doing now?
Yep.
So it's,
I'm okay.
yeah, it's whether it's the breadth of the investigation and whether it has an impact on this budget, or whether that's something that will be part of the next budget if the investigation finds that we need one, or whether it will be 5 years down the track.
Through Mr. Mayor, I might see if Andrew has any commentary on that.
Thank you, through the chair. It's working. I think the answer to the question is that the future of the additional dog park is really wrapped up into the Northern Parklands. And once we've seen the master plan, then we can further consider what that funding model looks like. I guess what commitment, if anything, council needs to provide to it. But if it's on trust land, then it's basically going to be managed by the trust. In terms of its impact on the existing dog park, I would have thought there would be none. But I'm happy to come back to council if and when we've got further details as part of the master plan process.
Sorry, it's not the existing dog park. It was that whether the investigation might identify that there is the need for two at the current time with the existing population, as opposed to the new population which will be there after Cuddler.
It's an interesting question. I guess as part of a broader conversation that we're looking at within our team, one of the areas which we probably need to do more work on is modelling the effective growth on community infrastructure. And as part of the restructure, we've actually now got a dedicated resource looking at modelling of needs. So I would foreshadow that would come back to council with some further thoughts on that, maybe via workshop or other over the next 6 to 12 months, but I can't narrow it down, be more specific on exactly when. But I'd also like to buy a bit of time to see what happens with the master plan and then give you the full story.
Yep, thank you.
Does that answer your question, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, yep,
Yep.
it does.
Councillor Hennessy?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe the CEO could go through the community grant participatory budget thing again. The officer's report talks about the fact one is treated as capital and the other is treated as operating. Yeah. From what I hear you say now, it'll all be treated as operating. We won't put the full amount of participatory across. We'll save $25,000 of that. Is that my understanding?
Yep, no, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to clarify my thoughts and what I've shared. The first nuance is, at the minute, the participatory budget largely goes to build capital things. So it's a capital expense. It doesn't come on affect our operating bottom line. So if we transfer those funds into community grants, it immediately puts a reduction to our operating surplus. So that's that change. Councillor Solomon's proposal talked about simply taking the funds and putting them in. And if we did that, that would make the pool $55,000. I was probably being a little bit cheeky and suggesting, okay, I think I understand what Councillor Solomon was trying to achieve. It's a suggestion, and I guess I was trying to strike a balance between just limiting the hit on our operating surplus and to get what I felt maybe the outcome that Councillor Solomon was trying to achieve. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. I guess I'm interested about how staff will feel. I remember through the community grants program a couple of years back, there was a barbecue suggested down in the Gawler South, one of the playgrounds down there. So again, some of the community grants could be going towards infrastructure that we will eventually own, as in that. So
Yep.
does that pose any problems for staff?
No, through you, Mr Mayor. So in short, no problems. That just becomes an accounting issue, and we,
Okay.
yep, so.
Whoop.
Would,
So I would sit there and say that irrespective, if we're actually giving it to a community group, so from our perspective, the expense will actually still go out as a recurrent operating expense. If they give it back to us again, then yes, it becomes our asset, but from an accounting treatment, because we're actually not owning, because it doesn't, from a community grant perspective, why would we give money to a community grant to build an asset that we're going to own? So I would sit there and say that there will still be a operating impact, even if they do build a capital item that they're planning on at a later date, giving it back to us.
So is that risky? In that we're going to end up with some assets that, again, as I understood it, we made the change to the participatory budget because ideas were coming through that weren't aligned with our strategic plan. So this seems to be another way that we could get into that situation, unless we write some conditions, I guess.
I suppose, through the chair, sorry, I would sit there and say that the intent of the community grant program is for us to give money to a community group to do something for themselves. And if from a guidelines perspective, from a community grants perspective, and I'm not close enough, and David may be able to add to it, to sit there and say that them asking for money to build a barbecue that they're going to give back to us probably wouldn't actually meet within the existing guidelines anyway, because it's more about what the community, like their community groups, based on their criteria of what they're actually doing.
Thought you might have a follow-up question, Deputy Mayor.
I'm not sure the best way to do this. I'm happy to wait until the actual motion. Otherwise, I could suspend meeting procedures quickly to talk about the items which have been proposed. Otherwise, I'm happy to wait if it's preferable to talk to it in the actual motion about the intention.
Yeah, look, I'm more than happy to accept a suspension of meeting procedures, so we can talk this one through. We've got a couple of reason we're here is
Yeah, I think that might.
motion for that, or I can suspend.
Well, seek leave, don't I? Seek leave. Yeah.
just take leave of the
So I'm seeking leave of the meeting.
So I seek leave of the meeting then.
Hand up, hand.
majority.
That's 2/3. That is carried.
Okay.
All right. The meeting's now suspended. It'll be suspended for, what, should we say 15 minutes?
If I may, Mayor, just
Yeah.
speaking of that, I think the intention behind that one, I think that, and I spoke to Councillor Davies about this, I spoke to a few other councillors about this, but the intention behind the participatory budgeting was originally to give community members some say in projects that they wanted to see in their community, but there has been that struggle with how we align it with our priorities as a council, and so it has evolved over time. And I think that one thing which became really evident in the last community grant scheme was that there was a lot of good ideas and good projects that were happening within our community, which we were really empowering people to deliver on, but could only be delivered on by virtue of the fact that they had organisations, associations, volunteers, they're willing to put in the extra work. So the logic behind this one was to bring some of that goodwill and money over to this scheme. And I think that the problems which we're talking about now will be addressed by the policy which will eventually come back to the council about how we actually use that scheme and that money, because there is to me, there seems a potential version of events where we do establish where, maybe we do build a council asset with that money, or we keep it as it is at the moment, where it is solely the asset of a community group, but that's something which will be determined by the policy rather than the actual changing of where the money sits currently. At the current time, though, the existing policy will remain without a change to it, and so the participatory budgeting scheme will come to an end, and what is currently the community grant scheme, which has really good take-up, especially as of late, gets bolstered and will run twice yearly as opposed to once yearly. And so when we get people come to us and say, hey, I missed out on this, it's a really good thing, they don't wait another 12 months and forget about it and then do the same thing again. So that was the logic behind that.
Councillor Davis?
Yeah, just to say, yeah, I have been, because, well, obviously the participatory budgeting thing was my motion in the first place, so I've been fairly protective of it, but I do think it's something that I think the way that we're doing the community grants right now, it has lagged behind. We haven't actually increased that 15,000 figure in a long time. What we did was we increased the $1,000 maximum to a $1,500 maximum, but we didn't increase the maximum of amount spent, which means we're approving less projects and we're denying more people their projects because instead of being able to fit in $1,000 submissions, it's $1,500 submissions, or 10. $1,500 submissions. And so I think that's one that's fallen behind and does need a budget update. I did have a question for the Deputy Mayor about his other one about the public art policy. I was just wondering if he could explain that a little more.
Happy to explain the logic behind that. I think, and it's come up in conversations having come up in discussion with several art groups around the town and people who have been talking about doing murals, is that once a mural is up, there's a lack of understanding or process about what happens to it. So things which are probably important considerations for us as a council in terms of maintenance and asset management in the future, like when does a mural's lifetime end? Is a mural supposed to be there permanently? Supposed to be there for 100 years? Is it fine that after 10 years that mural's painted over? And I think that doing that at the inception of having the murals is a lot better than trying to do it at a point where there is a lack of expectations around that, and then we have conflict. So that's something which, as we get more and more public art throughout the town, it's not just murals, but public art throughout the town, I think if we have policies and procedures in place that establish that from the onset, it causes less issues down the track, and it gives, it ensures that the expectations of council and the community are the same. In regard to the other aspects of it, I think there is potentially some work that we can do with ensuring, with as a connector. We've talked before about connecting artists with businesses who might be interested in doing these things, exploring that element of it. And at the moment it is just exploring what our role would be in there, and how much control council should have or shouldn't have on what is public art on a private business. And once again, setting those expectations from the onset so that we don't get further down the track and have conflict because of it. In terms of the latter part, I also think there is an element where protection of some murals is something which council may be able to contribute to in a small way. But once again, I think we need to understand the expectations around that, where council does and doesn't remove graffiti from murals, where we put protective layers over that. And there is, I think, a case to contribute financially in a small way to the protection of murals. I'm not sure what bucket of money that comes out of at the moment, but it's something that I was wanting explored as part of that policy. So that's the logic behind it.
I'm in agreement, except that, and I think it will come up in the new guidelines that I know that David's working on. Most graffiti artists already protect their own artwork, so I'd look forward to seeing what that looks like. I'm not sure we should be paying for graffiti. But I absolutely agree. Setting up expectations early and making it very clear. I'm not sure whether public art requires a development application, does it?
I believe so, yeah.
Does? Okay, does that give us then some control if somebody wants to put something inappropriate on a wall?
Certainly does.
Because so far, and we've got increasing numbers of private businesses now investing in that, which is excellent, but I think, guidelines would be good. I'm very comfortable with the changes to the community grants, thanks to their further explanation. And I actually think it'll work much better because we were getting feedback that the way we'd structured the participatory budget was too controlled. People were not particularly interested in just choosing a project from a shortlist. They want some ability to choose what their community group wants to be involved in, so that's great. I like the solutions for the softball and the Hemmerford Grove irrigation that was contained in the report. I have a problem with the Dad's Group request for $8,000. As the officer said, when we granted this 4 years ago, it was as a once-off seeding fund. Well, I think it's a fabulous program, and I admire and congratulate the people involved. I'm not sure we should set a precedent of rolling over for another $8,000. We have lots of people in this community doing good work. Lots of people other people doing good work for fathers and that type of thing as well. I'm conflicted by that, and I actually at this point probably won't be able to support it.
Councillor Hughes?
I support the changes to. I don't think the participatory. I think the participatory but project sort of was working but wasn't working in a way. It did get too complicated. I think our grants are a little bit underdone, so I think upping that is really good. I do think that the policy and procedures and everything else really need to be smartened up because some of the applications just needed a fair bit of guidance as well. So, there was some really good applications and we only had a limited budget. So I do actually like that whole process, and I think it's a better process. And it's quite supportive of that. And also think that the Dad's program was a once-off as well. So don't actually support ongoing funding for that project.
Councillor Davies?
Yeah, just to add the community grants, the actual how we do the community grants has also been discussed. It's not in here presumably because it's not a budget item, it's just redoing our policies, but it is something that did come up when we were doing the grants, is it can be confusing to navigate for some of the groups as to what exactly they should be doing. So just a question on the budget, just a more general question on the budget. The microphone upgrade, which is very good, very important. I'm getting more and more frustrated by those microphones. Do we have a more accurate figure yet as to what it might cost?
Through Mr Mayor, yes we do. David and his team have been, I should say David and Sharon and the teams have been doing some work on this. But if I can hand to David just to give us a bit of an insight into that. Thanks, David.
Through the chair, I can't say too much because we're in the final stages of the tender evaluation and we're yet to award the contract. But what I can say is it's under the budget amount. I'm not going to say substantially because it certainly isn't, but it's under the budget amount at this point.
But just as a reminder there, that would be a borrowings decrease as well. So we're not with rate. Yep.
Just another general question. At the last budget sort of meeting we had, I was asking how many, or was there a lot of ratepayers in arrears with their payments? and I was actually asked what those percentages were, and we do have a lot of people on payment plans, but I'm just wondering, where we're at with how our community is going with keeping up with their payments, because I'm hearing the cost of living, people aren't paying their house loans and deferring interest and things like that, so just interested to know where we're at.
Is that any, are we able to get any context on that one at all?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot about that one. Sorry, Councillor Hughes. We might be able to actually get it for you tonight as well. So
Okay. Stay tuned on that one. Okay. Any other questions? I know we're meetings procedures. Councillor Davies?
Yeah, so I know this is, it's more flagging it than assuming you'll know an answer, considering we all found out today via the advertiser, but the local government elections that we have, like $250,000 in funding, potentially may be delayed for an unknown period of time. Just wondering, yeah, any comments on that one?
Yeah, certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're quite correct in that we don't know what the actual answer is going to be. So my advice at this point in time is not to touch that. Worst case scenario, it stays there and the election happens in this coming financial year. Even if it goes to the next financial year, just means the costing, it'll be budgeted again, but it'll come forward. So my advice is we'll let that sit at this point in time, given the unknowns. Yeah.
Thank you. Just while we're suspended meeting procedures, I thought I might just so just around the different options there, Mr. CEO, would it be, I mean, obviously we had the 4 capital projects, and if we turned around, if the chamber was inclined and said, look, we want some modelling around as if all 4 were accepted, not saying that we're accepting all 4, but if they were, we want to understand the real material effects. For example, shelter for softball, that's a capital, I'm assuming, so we would increase borrowings for that. But we'd still want to understand the material effect. So can you walk us through, the chamber turns around and says, all 4 of those submissions, we want to play it out, see what that looks like, and then talk us through the process of how that could be dropped out or added to, whatever, but not trying to catch Sharon and her team off guard, obviously.
No. So I'll have a go at this, and then Sharon can tell me if I missed anything. The DADS group is straight operating costs, so that at this point in time, assuming we're essentially in agreements that we're not looking to touch the rate rise, that would reduce the surplus by $8,000. So I think that one's fairly simple. The community grants movement, assuming for a minute that the council is comfortable with the logic I was using about making a pool of 40 rather than a pool of 55, that's a movement of $40,000 out of capital and then coming off our operating. So that would reduce our surplus by, call it $40,000 at this stage. So that's just a direct reduction to operating surplus. Now, the other 2, I'd say they're not quite as simple. The softball shade sale, I think we need to have regard for the fact that in 12 months' time, this asset is going to go across to the Northern Parklands Trust. Now, there would be a possibility that the Parklands Trust may be able to work on the infrastructure that's provided to these groups. So I just asked the council to have a think about that nuance when you think about this shade. But if you did want to do it, it would result in increased borrowings of $110,000, and the impact on our operating side would be interest costs. What would I say that was, Sharon? Quite minimal? Yeah, so not material, but there would be some minor increased interest cost. Hemmerford Grove, I'm just reflecting on some of the conversations we've had around this table about Hemmerford Grove and that reserve and whether it should be irrigated or not irrigated in the past. So it would just be worth council trying to understand if that commentary still stands or whether we've a mind now to change that. If we do start irrigating, particularly Hemmerford Grove, it's a similar figure. So the borrowings would increase by 100-odd thousand, minor increase in interest cost. But the other thing we'd have to factor in, and David, correct me if I'm wrong here, if we start irrigating that, it may have an operational impact on the maintenance of that reserve. Can you just quickly share your thoughts on that, David?
Through the chair, if we did irrigate Hemmerford Grove, it would become a different classification of reserve and being an irrigated open space instead of a non-irrigated, and our maintenance crews would have to be there mowing on about a 6-weekly basis. I'd have to get the cost impact back through on operating, but it would be an increase in our operating costs for our maintenance crews out on the field. And just to clarify, the cost is about 150,000, not 100.
Sorry.
Possibly a little bit higher because that was a budget bid from a couple of years ago. So we'd have to revisit the full cost of that project, but the base would be 150 plus a bit of escalation, I would assume, from 2 years ago.
Cool. Does that help you out, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, look, I think that, does that provide a little bit of clarity, I guess, around process? Deputy Mayor?
Just a quick question about Hemmerford Grove Reserve, just to recap on that, because there's quite a few conversations that happened about that, but was it part of the last budget it was put below the line? Is that where we made the decision to not irrigate the reserve?
So my understanding is the decision not to irrigate happened back in the millennial drought.
Yes, yeah,
and
there
as
was...
sorry.
Sorry, go on.
Yep.
Sorry.
And then as a consequence of the being shut off for a large number of years, the irrigation's brittle, valves don't work, so the rest of the whole system would need to be replaced. We did have a conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, team, last budget? Did it come up at last budget?
I believe...
The one before.
I believe it...
One
I believe
before,
it,
I think.
I believe it came back by virtue of the discussion around the Hemmerford Grove telephone
Actually,
tower.
that's
And
you're right.
that's when we decided
because it was
that we
during my
wanted
time
to investigate
so
it
would have
and
been as a
then-
result of the tower.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was when we investigated it, but I can't remember the point at which we said we weren't going to proceed with it. That was all, but I'm wondering if that was the last budget where we put it below the line.
Might have been the one
Yeah.
before.
I think it was.
Yep.
If it was before Chris's time.
Yeah.
We'll try to find that information. And just before we run over our 15 minutes, I guess I just wanted to speak to the dads group. I completely understand what Councillor Hennessy and Councillor Hughes are talking about. I guess what we've seen in that dads group funding and what they've been able to turn it into has just, it's really growing. That said, I do acknowledge that this isn't a service that council provides. It's merely a service that council sponsors, and whether or not we should be sponsoring it every single year, year on year. That said, I think it was a good presentation put forward by Kim Wright, and again, I don't think we disagree with the great work that they do down there. If we were in a different position, I think I'd be intimidated by the $8,000. But at this point in time, the position that we're in, I'm actually not intimidated personally. I would personally love to see this funded, just to continue through with what that momentum's going, and while council can, and the things that it links into in our community plan and all the reasons that we voted for it in the first place, I think still exist. And the fact that we did have those minimal submissions coming through, and this is one of those ones that we could actually have one of those low investments for a big impact, and only stronger again because of the way the program's grown. But that's just, again, we all have differing opinions, and as you know, I don't get a vote, but it is one of those ones that it seems like a good community investment, the one that we actually don't need to allocate any operating expenditure to, which is why I was attracted to it. But regardless of any of that, you know, this is the process, and we'll keep on talking it through. Obviously, with the Carbeathan Reserve one, I think that sound advice on we probably need to understand how Carbeathan lands with the Northern Parkland thing, because we could increase borrowings for an asset that ultimately we would know. Now, there's good and bad, because obviously it won't be on our depreciation list and the like, but we'll increase our borrowings and then pay the minor interest for an asset that we ultimately don't own. So there's going to be a little bit of that probably going on when the Northern Parklands comes online already. So trying to understand where the cards lay, I understand that mentality. The Hermitford Grove expenditure, I think we have had multiple conversations around that and the class of, you know, how we're going to look after our parks and rec and whatever. And I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation more broadly because I think what is up there now isn't quite living up to the standard to a degree. But that said, what was the cost of, you know, getting it up to that expectation standard? And the other one about the grant program, I think there's been some great conversations at the Youth Advisory Committee on even sporting grants when we're talking about that side of things and what we actually pay and what we have left over in budget each year. And, you know, the community grants program and sporting grants, all these things that we want to inject back into our community, I think are great things. I'm really interested to see how that model works. I applaud the direction and the thinking around that. But look, yeah, that's probably my 2 cents while we're in suspended meeting procedures. But again, you know, we're going to be in your hands here, and we're going to be able to, pivot to whatever we need to do. So on that note, I'm probably going to have to close meeting procedures or open meeting procedures. If you do have some questions before, though, Deputy Mayor, more than happy. So we're going to move back into meeting procedure at 7:44. And Deputy Mayor, did you have a question?
I was just going to say, do we need to alter one of the recommendations to pick up the wording on page 14, which talks about to review this community grant scheme and provide a report back to council by August to enable any endorsed changes to be implemented?
I think there's some wording that we might be able to do over point 5, Councillor Hennessy. So we might be able to turn around and change that up to, instead of makes no changes to the draft budget as a result of the public submissions, we could change that to investigate the, Mr. CEO, did you want to add to that?
Yep, that's absolutely correct. And point 5 is the area that we would need to adjust. I think Sharon may have a draft on words that we might be able to hang some things off. Is that?
So my recommendation would be that if there's any motions from the floor to actually include anything in the draft budget as a result of the submissions, that they are actually put forward and voted on as individual motions. We have done some pre-preparation on the off chance that potentially things got added in. So we do have some pre-prepared motions. If any of the elected members actually suggest anything. With regard to your comment regarding the review of the community grants program for the guidelines, we can just add that as a separate clause, because obviously that won't have any budgetary impact. It's just basically a request that we review that. So I suppose it's the question I would sit there and say that if a motion was put forward to increase the community grant program, I would actually elaborate that to sit there and say subsequent, following a review of the community grant program guidelines, the budget be increased to such and such. If that is a motion that is actually going to get put forward, as opposed to just having it sort of
Thank you.
hanging out there on its own.
Thank you. Just give us a minute.
Changed 0.5, we'd have the same effect though, and then you could actually feel out the items from the chamber. But then what you're saying is, yes, but if you put in multiple of 0.5 and one drops out, we'll be amending and amending and amending? Okay.
We'll have some motions without notice first, and then, yes, okay.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, look, I'm happy to accept that process because judging by the conversations of the room, at least that does then talk about any item or, you know, might only get one, whatever it is. And then that allows us to have those discussions. So, to that end, I believe I saw some of your templated ones. If I ask for a mover for the community grants one, is that?
Can I ask two questions first?
Yeah,
Sorry.
absolutely. Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
I was
No.
just sorry to go backwards here, but just in relation to the shades sale, where does that fit into the SCARF as well? That's been worked on. The SCARF is in the sporting infrastructure plan, which we were looking into. Does it fit into there at all, or is it an extra?
Sorry, I just didn't understand the question.
So just our sports and rec plan
sorry.
talks about
Yep.
shelter at Carbeethan.
Sorry, and David's.
Sorry,
got the
I
answer
don't
well,
remember
Senator.
what the acronym stands for. I remember the acronym though. Yeah.
All good. All good. Thank you, David.
So through the chair, those shade structures that are being proposed by the softball club were not included in our master plan for Carbeethan or the sport and community and recreation facility plan updates. The proposal in all of that is actually the change rooms that are currently there, the old ones to be demolished and a brand new building constructed to house gymnastics as well as baseball and softball on car park areas and changes around that, but no additional spectator shelters for baseball or softball was envisaged in those plans.
Yeah. Okay. So it does. Yeah. Okay. Yep. And then just in regard to the extraordinary rate increase cap, at what point do we articulate what that is going to be? The cap that we put on a maximum increase in rates in any given year.
That's actually part of the strategic rating policy. So we have currently 10% increase in rates payable for residential, and then I think self-funded retirees is 20%. Is that right? So we have a 10% cap and a 20% cap on application, depending on whether you're a self-funded retiree or not. I can't, off the top of my head, remember which way it goes around, but that's actually part. So we currently have that in our rating policy now.
Okay. It was 10 and 20.
Yeah.
So bear with me one second. I'm just looking at the policy. Sorry to. My understanding was that it had been taken out and was set as part of each yearly budget instead. This is reviewed each year.
So any change to that will actually be in the rates declaration, when the rates declaration comes.
Okay, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's planned to be 10 and 20, and
Yeah.
that will be...
So,
and
so essentially, that's what it's been. And
Yeah.
to be honest, I thought it was actually set out in the policy.
Yeah,
To sit there and
used to
say
be.
that this is what it is, but we actually do also have to declare that, and we're not proposing to change that cap,
Yeah. Yeah.
capping policy.
Yeah, just because it was the change to policy, I did want to make sure it was articulated at a point so that we were aware of it as what it was going to be before the final thing. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before I look for motions without notice?
Yeah, well, I wasn't sure if the deputy mayor wanted to move the grants one, but otherwise
Sorry, just in regard to that, I should ask the question quickly. I have had some conversations with the CEO about redrafting the grants policy. Now, there was some back and forth in regard to which council would make an ultimate decision on adopting the policy
Yes.
and whether we could fit in this term reviewing it and then the next council would adopt it, etc. Understand as of today there's some recent changes which would mean that this council would do it anyway.
Might buy some time.
Provided they actually occur. But I'm just wondering if I can get some advice from staff. What's an appropriate motion to preface that today, or should I just seek to try and put that full motion, which I was going to hold off on putting on notice till the June meeting now? What's the best approach?
Bit of a sidebar. Am I right in saying, Deputy Mayor, that moving this motion without notice is going to be premised on the policy work that needs to go?
Yeah, to be honest, I think we can. I think that we can state our desire at the current time to have that investigated, and then also at the June council meeting, put in place a proper process to adopt a new policy. And should we not want to create a new policy, which I think there is actually appetite for, then it continues as the old policy. I think that that's appropriate to proceed that way at the moment.
And is this a message that you'd like to send at this point in time, noting that we do have, in a couple of weeks, we will have our ordinary council meeting? I'm just trying to understand the material effects.
We could predicate the additional funding on the passing of the policy.
My thoughts are that you could put words to the effect of, for example, that council increases the allocation to community grants, noting that the conditions will be reviewed, and that gives you latitude to approach it whichever way we wish to approach it, but it locks it in hard code that the conditions will be reviewed at some point in the future.
I'm happy with that if my colleagues are happy with that.
Yep.
Okay, well, in that case, I'm happy to move.
So are you happy for the Deputy Mayor to move?
Yeah.
Yep. No worry, because I did take Councillor Davies there
That's
first,
right,
but the Deputy Mayor, if you're wanting to move a motion without notice. Deputy Mayor Solomon is moving in regards to the community grants. Yes. And it will be a 2-point.
Did we include the fact that making it twice a year? Is that something that needs to go in the motion?
Monsieur.
You could do that, but my advice would be to hold off until you do your review, because then you're reviewing it holistically rather than piecemeal.
Cool.
Answer your question? Yep. Are you happy with that wording for point 1 while you're reading? So just the second one on the page. This is pretty much the of the participatory from capital into operating, as we've been discussing.
Yep. I'm happy with that
And
word.
we'll probably look for a point 2. Yep.
Is it noting that the is it noting that? Just quickly through you, Mayor, is
Yes.
that point to be noting, given that the review, the actual review, is going to be like we'll set out a process for that review with a working group or whatever we decide on a later date. So is that notes now as opposed to that it will be reviewed? Because otherwise that sounds like an action we're telling the CEO to do.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep, okay.
So that council knows the community grants program guidelines to be reviewed.
Will be reviewed.
No, I'm clear that it's not me reviewing them. I'm clear
Yeah.
that
Council notes will be reviewed. So note that's perfect. The council notes the community grants program just say will. Also, community grants program guidelines will be reviewed.
And the word that the community grants.
Council notes. Yes. Notes that. Yes, that's proper grammar, isn't it? Yep.
Pedant.
Speak to your motion.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to put that forward. I think I've already articulated that this is still trying to achieve some of the objectives that were originally set out by Councillor Davies in the participatory budgeting, and I think and a credit to you, Councillor Davies, on putting forward what I think was quite an ambitious effort to engage community members with the budget process and have them take part in it. I think that what this is doing is hopefully capturing that sentiment, and it's building upon that. We saw a huge uptake in the community grants program recently. We understand that needs to be refined, but we've also seen that those programs go a long way towards building the social infrastructure which exists in our community, and that is only done through the goodwill of volunteers and the people that put their time and effort into these organisations, and they help to stretch this money so far. So I think that is a worthwhile cause to increase these grants, because every dollar that we're putting in here is going so much further than it ever possibly could. Would council be doing this alone? And that's a space which I've said many times, it's not the role of council to run every community program, to do everything for our community welfare, but instead to empower those groups who already have the infrastructure, the expertise, and who are so dedicated in the role that they play for our community. So this is an extension of that. I hope that this will go some way towards ensuring that those groups have access to a greater amount of resources, and that we get some of those really great outcomes that we're looking for.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Davies, you happy to second? Would you like to speak?
Yes, I'm happy to second this. As previously mentioned, I did originally move the participatory budgeting to try and get people more involved in owning our budget and feeling a sense of belonging, that it's not just a council top-down approach, but a grassroots approach. And I think at the moment the Community Grants Project is a great way of making sure that grassroots succeeds. When we say, $1,500 goes towards a community group for a grant, it's actually probably upwards of $15,000 in volunteer hours that get added to that by the actual group who are hosting that event or installing that infrastructure, or if you were to, as we do during, National Volunteer Week, say, well, if we had to pay these volunteers at a rate of whatever the current rate is, $30 an hour, we would be out several $100,000. And so I think it would be really great to be able to empower more community groups to be able to do more in a way where we're supporting different events and things popping up all over the town, and we can review the guidelines. We can review, for example, is it still $1,500 per submission? These are all things that can come in as part of the guidelines, and I'd be happy to continue discussing that. But yes, for now, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Hennessy.
Yeah, I'm happy to support this. Thank you to the people who've put a lot of work in getting to us to this position. I think it's a nice outcome. It does empower the community and allows a wide range of projects to be picked up. I guess I just want to reinforce in general that we've been all working on this budget since about January, and there's been a lot of discussions and a lot of hard decision making in order us to both comply with our long-term financial plan and to have the discipline to remain within a balanced budget. So I'd like to thank the staff for all the work they've done, for how they've presented it to us. Not everyone is happy with every budget, but I certainly can say that, in spite of the tough conditions we face and the unpredictability of the next 12 months, we've come in at this stage with a small operating budget, and then we're well set up to be able to guide our way through what's going to happen. Maybe or maybe not. We'll see what happens on that. So my thanks to the staff.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy.
Yeah, the question, the budget,
Sorry, is your microphone on? Sorry.
the motion up on top of has that been scrapped, has it? The
We
one
just haven't
before
got to
we
it.
started talking.
To that one yet?
Sorry?
No. Any further discussion? No? Yeah. Councillor Samble, did you want to move the Dad's group? Did you want to move that motion there, Councillor Samble?
I just wondered why we didn't handle it, that's all.
Draft motion. You're looking to move something there?
Yeah, look-
Councillor Davies?
I'll move the Dutch group one. I don't know how much support it will have, but at least we can have the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Davies. Yep.
And look, this is, but yes, I definitely agree that projects can't just forever be part of the council, but I do see I do see something that is growing and growing and making use of everything that it gets to continue expanding local community networks. And it's like I was talking about in the last motion, sometimes you put in $8,000 of funding and what you get is $80,000 of volunteer hours that go into the community and do great work. So I'll move this and see where it goes.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Do I have a seconder? You're happy to second, Deputy Mayor? Would you like to speak at all? No? Any further discussion? Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, just that, unfortunately, because of our budget situation, there's probably 200 community, it's not probably, there's lots of community groups that would do very good work with $1,000 or $1,500, and that's why I supported the last motion. And that's what we were doing with these grants. There's nothing stopping this group from applying for grants in other areas, whether it's state government, Commonwealth government, depending on what our guidelines end up with, our grant, and then it's fair and open to all of our community. I think we are supporting one group and there's so many other groups in our community that may be more in need and do more with the money as well. So I won't be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Any other discussion? There be none. Councillor Davies, would you like to close the debate? You're happy for me to put that motion? I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour? All those against? It is carried on the casting vote of the Mayor.
Division.
The Councillor Hughes has called a division. All those in favour, please stand. All those in favour is Councillor Vallelonga. Oh, sorry, I'll just let the minute taker catch up. Sorry? Sorry, yes, yes, yeah, these are four, yes. So Councillor Hughes called a division. Oh, that's okay. No.
That's a good sign.
Okay, you're noting it, so I'm going to keep on advancing. Cool. Those that are for, Councillor Vallelonga, Councillor Davies and Deputy Mayor Solomon. Those against, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Hennessy, Councillor Samble. The motion was declared for on the casting vote of the Mayor. Thank you, members. Okay, yeah, no worries.
Can I ask a question, please?
I'll take a question. Minute taker is
Sure.
catching up.
Can I ask through you, Mayor?
Yes.
What does that now make our operating surplus? I'm going to say that $8,000 off makes it,
172 in its current form.
yep.
Plus
147.
25 for the,
Right, okay.
So on page, the staff have actually, so 147 is if option 2 was adopted, which, yeah, so you look like you're wanting to jump in there, Mr. CEO.
You're absolutely correct. But as I mentioned earlier, the surplus is slightly higher. It was given $6,000 higher. So the actual figure is 153.
Yep.
Okay, so
So
we've now
150.
reduced our margin down to 153. Okay, thank you.
though noting we actually saved money on the other one, it's just went from
It's the one for
recurring
capital.
operating, recurring capital to recurring operating.
So to your point, Councillor Hennessy, if it was 180, it would go down to 172 because the 8,000 isn't moving of cost from capital over. So that's where. Yep. I hope that answers your question. Minute taker is caught up. Is there any other motions without notice? There be none. I'm going to go back to item 4.1, and we're probably just going to need some wording change for point 5. Mr. CEO?
Yep, I think as a start, we drop that out altogether. I'm just going to clarify. Just give me 2 seconds.
Yep, that's right. Sorry, we're just trying to get this wording correct.
And should we mention that we're cutting out the participatory budgeting? That is part of the budget, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is part of the budget, yes. Amend the budget to pick up the two options. Yes. Yes, yep. Yes, I believe so. Resolution 1. Can't we just do amend the draft budget to include resolutions and then copy and paste the two resolutions under the point? So the wording's still, so amend the draft budget to include resolution 1, the draft budget as a result of the public submission, which is the DADS Group 8,000 and council member submissions, which is an increase of the community grants program up to 40,000. We're still not quite there, I don't think. Yeah, that's fine. Yep. Yep. Yeah. I'm going to take some. Yep. Yes. Yep. Yep. And members, if you'd like to add in the material or whatever you want to do, I'm in your hands, but I think this is a cleaner reference. But I'll look for a mover. I'm in your hands. Councillor Davies, you are wanting to move something. Is the officer's recommendation at the level you'd like to move it?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think just to say, well, thank you to everyone who has put in a public submission to our budget process. It's a very extensive process that we've been through a lot of sessions already and still have a bit more to go on this. At this meeting, we've made what what is a net savings of $7,000, but due to accounting will be presented as a deficit on the operating budget. But I think this is really overall something that I'd be really happy to send to our June ordinary council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second, and I might just comment on a few items quickly. I want to start with Hemmerford Grove, and I think that the reason I didn't seek to put up a motion about that particular project is I'm disappointed, not at a particular individual, but just at the situation of where we've got to with that one, just because there seemed to be so much community support around that at the time of the telecommunications tower, and I still think that there is potential that something more is done with that reserve, but I think at this juncture it's probably premature to put that irrigation system in without having an idea of what the potential could be to do for us to do something there. So I think that while I am generally supportive of looking at doing something with that in the future and restoring it to the classification that it should have been all along, I think that it does warrant some further investigation and some further input from the public before we take any action on that one. So that doesn't mean it's over, but it's not something which we can prioritise as this part of this budget for that reason, and because of the cost that it has versus the immediate benefit that it has doing it now. In regard to the shade sales, of course, that is something where we have the SCARF, which identifies that facilities and infrastructure plan, which does identify the necessary projects, and I'm really looking forward to funding a lot of those. I hope that we have avenues in place where, should amendments need to be made to master plans or additional things that can actually become part of that ongoing piece of work where we fund those infrastructure upgrades year on year. And unfortunately, the nuances of this one, where it does potentially go into the parklands at a point, makes it quite complicated. So I do understand the reasoning behind that and appreciate the additional information from staff. Obviously, thank you, as Councillor Davies says, thank you to everyone who's been part of this budget process. There's some things in there which I'm also looking forward to being funded or investigated as being funded through existing budget. I think that while it's not necessarily reflected on the motion on the screen at present, those things which we are able to accommodate in the existing budget are areas where we have really listened to the feedback that we've received. I think it's important to note that this budget, that what makes a budget as well is not just the feedback that we get now when we have the headline figure and when we talk about what the rate increase is. It is throughout the entire term of this council where we hear from residents about the footpaths they need, about the playgrounds they want, about the dog parks, about the sporting infrastructure, about the social and community programs that are enabled through this, the facilities that they use, the road upgrades that we've actually started to embark on and really focus in on through these last couple of budgets. So I think that while there is some great stuff in here, we do also need to be cognizant of the fact that we're always on the search for how we do business better, and always looking to take that feedback from our community and then adopt it as part of a budget package which delivers on their expectations. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mayor. Any further discussion? Councillor Hughes?
It's more the earlier question, whether the information...
Oh, sorry, yes.
Thanks.
Here's come.
Through the Mayor, yes, we have been able to find that information. So as at the end of May, so we currently have around about $800,000 of overdues that's in arrears. and that's off of around about $31 million of rates levied. However, about 50% of them, of that 800,000, is actually in a payment plan. So realistically, we actually do have a small portion of our community that is actually in a true arrears. And I would sit there and say from past experience that is actually very low. And I think it is a credit to, I suppose, the rates team and all that sort of stuff that actually, as soon as they see someone that becomes arrears, we're actually quite proactive and actually putting them onto a payment plan, so they're not actually getting into that that cycle of then paying interest and paying fines and all that sort of stuff. So we are actually quite proactive from that. So, and I think that that's actually reflective of those balances.
Yeah, no,
answer your
at
question?
previous times that amount's been over $1 million, so it's actually, I think there was a percentage set that it was about 4%, and I think that's under that as well, so that's a good figure. So.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I appreciate the question, Councillor Hughes. Any further discussion? There be none. Councillor Davies, would you like to close the debate?
Yeah, look, just once again, thank you to everyone. I think it is worth noting what the Deputy Mayor mentioned, that the fact draft budget changes not being made doesn't actually reflect not listening to the, I'm using a lot of double negatives, but the fact that nothing got changed in the budget originally as part of the submissions, there were actually a bunch of things that were taken on board and could be accommodated internally. I think that's worth noting, because I think I definitely understand the reason behind the original wording of the motion, but the make no changes as a result of the public submissions wording is one that's like quite stark, and I think it probably is worth noting that we are listening to feedback and acting on feedback as seen in the report. So I just wanted to finish off on that, and happy to move the motion.
Thank you. The debate is now closed. I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, members. We're on page 59. On this one, members, before I look for a mover, would you like to add some commentary to that one?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, the team have had to make some educated assumptions with this report, principally around what the impact will be on increasing prices to visitation, i.e. if you put the price up above a certain threshold, does that impact people's willingness to attend? So I'll say it's an educated assumptions have been made, but they are assumptions. But we did have to make some, put this report together. That's the only context I just want to make, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Any questions about this one before I look for a mover? You've got a question there, Councillor Samble?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Nathan. Whenever I hear the aquatic centre come up, I say to myself, how much longer are we going to work with this sort of thing and spend the money on it? And when I get this whole pile of papers that Victoria's put together and everything, the whole lot, I see all the sort of suggestions and things like that. I see nothing of the expenditure. And that's what's been a concern for the last 5 or 6 years or more, is that what are we spending on this swimming pool? None of this documentation that we have here tells us how much it cost to run last season. It's only open for a few months of the year. It's not open, for 12 months. I'm just wondering, how much longer are we going to be spending money on a facility that is outdated? And I noticed there, yes, there's no plans to replace it and all that sort of stuff, because we're talking a lot of money. But I just wonder why we don't get the expenditure. This is all the income.
So this one here, I'll have a crack at this one, Councillor Sample, and then I'll hand over to the CEO if need be. Response to some of the elected members' questions, and this is more around the dialogue that went, can we charge our locals, our Gawler residents, our Gawler ratepayers, a fee, and then can we charge those that aren't Gawler ratepayers a higher fee on that usage? The first report came back with, look, it might be a bit hard, and I'm paraphrasing, it would mean no offence whatsoever to those in the room. Look, that's a bit hard because of these reasons. And at the time, council turned around and said, look, we understand, but we do want you to go back and actually have a bit more of a think about this. This is merely the report that is the bit more of a think about, a different user charge. As to the costings of the aquatic centre as a whole, there are a few reports that come through yearly about the usage and also about what expenditure the pool is swallowing each year, and then some losses that a lot of losses that we do have to swallow as council as long as we have this facility. So to both your questions, I would say that we do have those reports, but this one is purely just based on what council requested at the time, and it's only on the user charge difference. Mr. CEO, is that a fair answer to that question? Did you have anything to add?
That's exactly what I was going to say. But I will add something extra. Sharon's just dug out the figures for me. In our budget document, just for everyone's benefit, page 26, it does articulate what we're spending, what the expenditure and the income is on the swimming pools. And if I can just quote the figures, just for Councillor Samuel's benefit, expenditure of 1.19 million, income of 448,000, so a net cost of 746,000.
You've got a question?
Yes, I do. It's actually from a member of the public who's read through this report. What's not mentioned, though, is the fact that if you apply for a season ticket of some form, you actually fill in a form at the moment. Would that be a possibility? Because that's a slow, it's not the, walking in, paying, going for a swim. It's actually an application process. Is that a possibility that we would ask for proof of address? It doesn't seem unreasonable at that point, and therefore be able to do a differential on the season ticket.
On the season?
Tickets as such.
I'll take that question, Mr. CEO.
I know there's commentary on that in the report, but I'll refer it to David.
Through the chair, certainly would be possible if council wishes to do that, but just note the ramifications of that will be an increased cost in the subsidy per visit, because if you subsidise Gawler ratepayers, other Gawler ratepayers pay for that subsidy.
Do you follow up there, Councillor
Or we
Hughes?
could put non-resident prices up.
Through the chair, as the report mentions, if we do put non-resident prices up, we expect a reduction in visitation. So therefore, revenue reduces, which increases the cost per subsidy to Gawler ratepayers.
You might have some comments in debate, Councillor Hennessy?
No, I'm
No?
fine. That's
Yep.
fine.
No follow-up questions. Any other questions before I move into debate? There being none, I'll look for a mover. You're happy to move, Deputy Mayor?
I'm happy to move and comment on maintaining the current fees and charges structure. I think we do need to be careful around the way that we separate out what is a facility simply for Gawler ratepayers versus Gawler residents versus non-ratepayers and non-residents. You know, we could set up a toll gate at Hewitt, all sorts of things. But and I think that's not necessarily to say that we can't have some things which are paid for by Gawler ratepayers and residents, which are specific to them. But I think in terms of these community facilities, we do need to be careful where that separation is drawn and the reasons why we do that. And if it is to save money or to support something like the maintenance cost of the pool, I don't think that's necessarily the right reason to do it. I grew up, of course, going to the pool at here and swimming there, but I also swam at the Aquadome and I also swam at the Udunda community pool growing up. And I think that to try and enforce council boundaries upon some of these community facilities is an exercise in imagination, if you like, where we're putting in place boundaries that don't actually exist to the average community member outside of some, abstract local government, boundary that's been drawn by the state government. So I think that we need to be quite careful in how we define these boundaries. And in regard to these community facilities, I'm certainly happy to see the pool maintained with the current fees and charges at the current time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Looking for a seconder? Looking for a seconder, members? The motion will lapse without a seconder. Okay, the motion is now lapsed in want of a seconder. Thank you. Moving forward, did you have a question?
I was just happy that.
Oh, so you'd like an alternative?
So just point one.
So just point one, okay. So the motion lapsed, the last motion that's on the screen now. Now I have Councillor Hughes dropping out point two. Would you like to speak to that at all, Councillor Hughes? I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, just briefly, thanking the staff for the report. I do think this is something, Joe, that Gawler Council needs to continue to look at. And I agree with lots of what the Deputy Mayor was saying about, Joe, whether you're a ratepayer or not. But, Joe, our rates are really high in Gawler, and we need to, Joe, sell the benefits of being a ratepayer in Gawler as well. So it's a difficult process, and I thank the staff for the detail that went into the report. But yeah, I do think that differentiation of what we're actually doing in Gawler, we are a small area, small number of ratepayers. We do have a large number of people coming into our area. It's pluses and minuses and everything else, but yeah, it's something that we certainly need to continue to work on.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Do I have a seconder for point one only, noting you're happy to second Councillor Davies? Would you like to speak at all to it?
Yeah, look, this is, well, it's functionally the same motion because unless someone moves otherwise, then point two will be in effect just by default. But I think there is a bit of a difference. And I do thank the staff for the report. I'm not fully, I suppose, in agreement with all of the. The data is helpful, but I'm not necessarily in full agreement with all of the assumptions. I think is where I think a couple of us are coming from there. But definitely happy to get the report and happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Hennessy?
Yeah, I'm happy to support it in this form. I don't think this is the end of it. Our community keeps coming back and saying, this is it's a very treasured asset, but it is a regional asset. So maybe unless we can tap into some regional funding, we are going to have to continue looking at it very carefully. There isn't a swimming pool in the whole of the lower mid-north, with the exception of one at Tanunda, and for the swim clubs, this is the only 50-metre pool around until you get down to Elizabeth. So I'm very happy and I'm glad that the community uses it, but we've got to come to a point where if our boundaries are what the boundaries are and we've got a limited number of residents in it, how on earth do we make it fair for our residents? And we have got a precedent. We use it in the cemetery fees. If you're a resident, you pay one fee. If you're a non-resident, you pay another. And that seems to have gone through quite smoothly. That doesn't seem to cause anybody in our community great angst. So I think we'll probably have to come back to this because it is very, as Councillor Samble says, it's a community facility that costs us, and that's, you know, it's fine because not all of our facilities are going to make money for us, but we have to ensure that fairness at all times. So I'll be in support of the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. Any further discussion? There be none. Councillor Hughes, would you like to close the debate? You're happy for me to I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. That concludes the business of tonight's special council meeting. I now close the meeting at 38. Thank you.